Good afternoon, Liberty Baptist Church. I'm glad you're here with me on this Wednesday. This is our Wednesday night Bible study, and I'm glad we're together. Even if we're not face-to-face, at least we're together through this video and through us studying the Bible together. And I hope that you are continuing to do your devotions and studying the Bible. I just want to brag on God if we can. What a great God we have. I've been praying for all of you and as well as our country and our world, and God has just been showing himself so strong and taking care of us. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. He always does take care of us, but I just wanted to brag on him. He has taken such good care of us. It's been a crazy month and a half. I think it was March. The beginning of March was the last time we were able to be together and have worship together face to face. Hopefully we'll see each other very soon. We're working on that, and hopefully that will come together. I want to thank you also for the notes of encouragement that you've given to me through whether it's been on Facebook or it's been through email or text. Even found a note on the pulpit Sunday morning, which encouraged me a lot. And I want to thank you all. Thank you. Just the encouragement I've received these past few weeks has really just been helping me to preach the gospel and stay close to God. And you've been helping that as well. You've been encouraging me or exhorting me. In fact, I heard yesterday some encouraging news that we may be soon getting back and getting on the downward side of the virus curve. And I'm excited to hear that our president and our governor are setting up plans for the state and for the nation to slowly get back into what they've been calling a new normal. As Christy Lane used to sing, as some of you are old enough to remember this, one day at a time, sweet Jesus. And that's how we're taking this. One day at a time, God's in control, and he's taking care of it day by day. I think that it's really good wisdom from God to make plans for important things like this. Just like getting back to business after this crisis has slowed down. And even though we don't know when that will be, it's good to have a plan. So when it does happen, we are ready for it. I know that sometimes I can overplan things. I've even planned vacations, overplanned vacations before. I just asked my family, this time we need to do this and this time we do this, and I've gotten a little better on that. But my dad always told me this. He said, if you have a plan and it doesn't work, you can always throw it out or you can change it. But if you don't have any plan, then basically what you're doing is planning to fail. And he used to tell me that, and it is so true. I think of this the next few months. We're going to be having to make plans, and I've been already thinking about plans and talking to people about plans and talking to our deacons and things like that. But we're going to have to figure out what the new normal may be at our church and with our church. Things such as handshaking or distancing ourselves or things like that. How we can meet together even though we're separate, like right now. Things like we've been talking about, the drive-in church idea. What can we do after this is over so that we never take our church for granted again and never take meeting together for granted again. I'm glad. I'm glad that we do have a church that we can meet together when this is over. And God's been providing, paying the bills so that we still have this church through you. Also, he's just been taking care of the needs that people have had, and I praise him for that. I just want to be ready. So when we are able to meet back together, we have a plan, and we can execute that plan, and we can serve God together once again. I hope you're ready for that as well. And as I look through the Bible, I see God's leaders always seem to have a plan of what to do. And usually that plan came from God. He would tell them. I think of Noah. Noah had the plans from God to build an ark to save his family and anyone that would accept God. In fact, God even told him dimensions and what kind of wood to use. Talk about a plan. I think of Moses and the Promised Land. And Moses was told and had a plan of sending spies, 12 spies, into the Canaan land or Promised Land. And he executed that plan, but afterwards that plan fell all apart and they abandoned the plan, and they ended up walking in the wilderness for 40 years because they abandoned the plan. I think of Joshua. And as soon as they got over the promised land and crossed Jordan, God gave them a plan of how to defeat Jericho. Gideon and the Midianites. I mean, who would have thought God's plan would have had them whittled down to 300 with just pots and lanterns, and he would defeat the Midianites like that. Or even Joseph. Joseph had a plan. God gave him a plan. And it didn't seem like that plan was working out after God gave him the plan through a dream when he was younger. But he had a plan, and God gave him that plan because Joseph was moved into a huge problem. But God gave him the plan for that even before he knew that he would have to have a plan like that. Joseph came into a worldwide crisis, a lot like today. But his crisis was a famine in all of the land. And the Bible tells us about the plan that God had for him and how he enacted it. And I want to encourage you today through this Bible study of the plans that God has for you as well. So if you have your Bible with you, turn to Genesis chapter 41. Genesis chapter 41. We're going to look real quick at Joseph and God's plans for him and how God enacted those plans, even though it didn't seem to make sense at the time. I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I just want to read verse 46 through 49 and 53 through 55 right now. So Genesis 41, verse number 46 through 49, and then we'll read 53 through 55. Did you get it? I hope you got it. Here we go. Verse 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the foods of the 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. He couldn't even number it. Look at verse 53 through 55. And the 7 years of plenteous that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph. What he saith to you, do. Now Joseph was made second in command under Pharaoh because God enacted his plan for Joseph. Joseph had a plan from God, and God said, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you, even though you're not from Egypt, even though you're an Israelite, I'm going to make you ruler over the land. And it didn't make sense at first until this happened. And Joseph's plan that he got from God was pretty simple. Usually, sometimes, I should say, the best plans are very simple. The first thing of the plan, Joseph said, and got this from God, save grain for 7 years, because we're going to have 7 years of good harvest, crops. And then the second one was, after the 7 years that they had good crops, during the 7 years of famine, he distributed the grain as people needed that, and he limited them, not so that there would be no hoarding or anything, but everyone was taken care of, and Egypt, it says, had food. Now that wasn't hard to understand. That was a pretty easy plan. But think about all those who thought they knew better than Joseph, all the Egyptians around. You know who those people are. We have them in our own life probably, and you've probably heard of them or heard them. They don't believe you or the crisis is so bad, and I'm sure they didn't believe Joseph really knew what he's talking about. They're like, oh, we're not going to have 7 years of famine. We're having such a good crops. How are we going to have 7 years of famine? And they're like, he's just making that up. It's not really that bad. It's easy to complain about people who are in charge and to discredit them, especially when one is a Jew in Egypt. As I think about, it's easy for us and for people to argue about the restrictions we have upon us right now. I mean, think about it. We went from don't have groups over 50, and then to don't have groups over 10, then to stay at home, hunker down, then don't go to beaches, and you've heard about not going to beaches or parks, not having sports, things like that, and even not having now congregational meetings or face-to-face meetings at church, even for Easter, which was hard and it didn't make a lot of sense, but I trust God. He has a plan. Instead of praying, though, for people who are in power, instead of praying for people who need wisdom and need to trust God, and we need to trust God, instead of doing that, it's easier to complain. But I'm encouraging you right now. Why don't we pray for those people? Pray that God will give them wisdom. And trust God that He is still in control. Because as far as I know, God is still in control of the government and still in control of anything He wants to be, and He is in control of His people. And everything I've seen so far coming out of the restrictions has not been against the Bible or against God. But I've heard a lot of preachers who have thought it was, especially evangelists, who don't even have a church that they're supposed to be taking care of or that they're in charge of. They don't have flocks that they have to take care of, but many of them are complaining. The restrictions of the church or of the government and everything like that. Many Christians who have been writing and some who have been preaching and complaining that the government has overstepped and they're oppressing the church. You know, a lot of them saying we should obey God and not the government. And though I can understand that it's hard, that these restrictions can be hard on us, and these restrictions sometimes rub us the wrong way. And yes, I do believe God comes first. I believe God always comes first. But I also know that I need, as a pastor, to protect my flock. I'm to keep them safe when I can, I should say. And this virus is no joke. And you know, I believe that God is still in control. I also know that the government wasn't telling us that we could never have church again. If they were, then I would be the first one to stand up and go to jail. Because I believe that church and I believe that worshiping God together is what we are supposed to do. But they haven't told us that yet. They've just put things in place to keep us safe. And I believe they are trying to keep us safe. I also believe that this is the best plan we have right now. And no, I'm not preaching for the government, but I do believe that God has placed our president, our vice president, our governor in leadership, and I believe that they are good people. I believe God has placed them in their positions. The Bible tells me that God has control of the placement of kings and leaders. And I love my people, that God has placed me over to pastor and to lead. And I have a responsibility to God to be a good steward of what He has given to me and what He has asked me to lead. As Christians, we just have to be more creative when it comes to church right now. But this too shall pass. The method of church is not our calling. Our calling is to get Jesus out to the world to help the sick, whether it's the sick, sin sick, or the mentally sick or physically sick. That's the great command and the great commission. To love God with all our heart and love others as we love ourselves. And that's the same reason why I see Joseph and he made his decisions. Things were not normal for him. There was no temple for him to worship in. So God sends him to a king to proclaim God's power and provision. He didn't receive the dreams himself. God gave those dreams to the king. Joseph was just in a place to show him God. Joseph didn't make up his own plans. Joseph didn't have the king build a temple so that he could witness to him. Joseph went to the king and witnessed how powerful God is. And that's why God blessed Joseph wherever he went, not just in Canaan land. From the pit to being a slave to being the head of a household, then back into prison to being the jail keeper to being number 2 over all of Egypt. God blessed as Joseph listened to him and followed his plan. Not Joseph's plan, but God's plan. Look at verse 38 through 40 in Genesis 41. I want to show you. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God, capital G, is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, For as much as God, capital G again, has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. I want to be a man after God's own heart like Joseph was. I want to be led by God and have God's plan in my life, my family, God's plan in my church. But the only way that happens is for me to stay close to God and to follow what he says, his ways. Not my own ways, not my own ideas, but his. Some of his ways that I want to follow, and I continue hopefully to follow, is through devotions, doing my devos. That's one of God's ways. That's what he has told me I need to do. Through witnessing, God has told me I need to tell people about him. Through going to church and how we do church, I want to do things God's way, not my way. In my family devos, I need to lead my family in devotions as well. And just serving wherever and however he wants me to serve. I want to encourage you to do the same. There's only one way to deal with anxiety and fear, and that is through healthy activity. Serving God will get rid of your anxiety. Anxiety, fret, they can paralyze us. Fear can paralyze us. They immobilize us. They get us stuck on the couch thinking, this is the worst thing ever that's ever going to happen, that's been happening, instead of having faith that God can use even a pandemic to receive glory from us. Respond to fear by developing a plan. Part of that plan, God has already given to you through his word, and the rest through wisdom. James chapter 1, 2-8 even says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall in diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect worth, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not. Remain grateful. Continue to love God. Put him first. He will never steer you wrong. I promise you that. I see that even in our own lives right now. Maybe you ask, so what's next? What can I do next? How can I help? Be a part of the team, of God's team. You know, you have a family who God has put you as leader over maybe, or to lead towards him. And you have a church that's part of your team as well. Be with us whenever you can. Serve God in your church and with your family. Let his plans be your plans. That's what Joseph did. Joseph basically was keeping calm and carrying on. That's an old World War II saying in Britain. Keep calm and carry on. Trust the one who is truly in control, and stay close to him so you can have his plan and follow his plan. Because I'll tell you what, God's got this. God has got this. Listen, I hope you have a wonderful week this week. And I'm hoping that soon we can be back together. It may be in our cars, but we'll still be together. But until then, I challenge you to do as Joseph did. Give it to God and keep calm and carry on. Trust him. I want to tell you all I love you, praying for you, and I'm going to continue to pray for you. And I'm glad that you are part of our church. Whether you're a member or not, I'm glad you're tuning in. I'm glad we can study the Bible together and that we can trust God together. Have a great day.